Hey, thanks very much. Thanks, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Thanks for having me. I've had a fantastic couple of days. I've met loads of really cool people, and I've learned loads. It's been really great. You know, I feel that the future is safe in the hands of the people that I've met over the last 48 hours. I've got to literally run out the door at the end of this because I've got to be in Wiltshire for an event. So what I do say is that I'm desperate to talk to as many people as I can. Please connect with me on the LinkedIn, on the interwebs, and I'd love to continue the conversation. But apologies that I will shoot. So as Tim was saying at the beginning, you know, what on earth am I here? What is that British Army going to tell you they don't already know? Well, probably not a huge amount, but what I'm really interested in is perspectives and perceptions, beliefs and emotions. And I think if your perceptions come from your beliefs and your emotions, it's important to understand kind of where you come from on this subject. And you know, why on earth is the British Army talking about this subject? You will have a perception of the British Army and what you think that their role is to play in sustainability. So I'm going to try and unpack some of that over the next 20 minutes. So in terms of kind of beliefs and emotions and how that leads to perceptions, it's important, I think, you know, if I uncover some of mine, then you'll understand where I come from. I'm hugely passionate about nature. I love nature. I spend a lot of time outside. I run a charity in Wiltshire that helped my daughter. It connects young people with special educational needs and disabilities with the outside world. I coach rugby, and clearly I joined the army. That's how some of my thinking has evolved. But I'm in the army, right? And the army's got a specific role. And so we've spent a lot of time over the last 48 hours talking about stakeholders and value and finance. And I'm not going to talk about finance at all, but I will talk about value, but I'll talk about value in a different way. And so, you know, how is my perspective shaped on value? Well, it comes down to what I've been talking about as competitive advantage. A lot of people have said to me, what do you mean by that? Well, I mean that to win. Right? We're an army. Our mission in life is to win. And that's kind of where it goes. I was really fascinated in the NHS talk yesterday when they said sustainability, but not at the cost of lengthening the queues for the NHS. Well, it's kind of the same thing, that sustainability, but never at the cost of our competitive advantage, never taking away our ability to win. And actually, I would flip it around the other way and say sustainability when it helps us to win. And I think there are opportunities, which I'll cover, that will help us with our value, which is ultimately to win. So that's the kind of perception of the army. I do think perceptions are really important. You know, I had a perception about climate activists, and so I went and spoke to some. And you know, Clive Hogan in particular kind of inspired me to do some thinking around it, and I went and looked at it. And you know, having just walked this morning through the square and seen the memorial to the suffragists, to kind of have a look at that and think how far would the suffragists have got without the suffragettes being the slightly more activist wing of them. You know, they kind of needed to do it together, but there needed to be that kind of activism to wake people up to the challenge they had. So, you know, just again, just kind of where I'm thinking on that. I need to work out how to move these on. I'll grab this. So, right, yeah, the army. So, interestingly, according to Vice President of the United States, we're an irrelevant country that hasn't fought any wars in the last 20 to 30 years. You know, so I'll talk a little bit about my time alongside the United States in Afghanistan. I was there 3 times, 2008, 2010, and 2012. Just under 2 years of my life I spent in Afghanistan. And I was a logistician. My role was to resupply the units. So we ran what we call hub and spoke operations. So we'd fly everything into Bastion, a big airfield, and then we would drive out to the bases where we would resupply people. And we do that in what we call the combat logistic patrol, which is a long line of vehicles, drives really, really slowly, has a mine roller on the front. We'd keep kind of driving around. We'd all stay hunkered down in our vehicles, and we'd drive this long snake of vehicles out to resupply the soldiers who needed stuff. Now, that kind of worked at the time. It wouldn't work now. It wouldn't work in how we fight or how we operate in Ukraine, protecting the people of Ukraine. Energy, as you can see on the CVs, become a target there. So we've got to find a different way of doing it. And as our operations become much more complex, I often describe it kind of like using an iPhone. There's a kind of complex operation of the military now. But at the moment, if we still use fossil fuels, it's a little bit like we're trying to power that iPhone with AAA batteries and have to take them out every 20 minutes. We need a different way of thinking about, we can't just keep building new drones and new technology and then expecting that we're just going to transport more and more fuel and use more generators. So we desperately need to find a different way. Part of that is being more efficient, and part of it is just using the new technology that's out there in a way that perhaps it isn't quite yet being used. So the picture of the water bottles is just, again, about kind of our use and our efficiency. As you can see, in 2008, when I was there, the picture of me with the water bottle is really important. We only got one a day, and the rest of the time we had to get our water from the wells or out of the rivers and purify it. And that water for us, it was like desert gold. You know, we were really, really careful about those bottles of water. It was the best thing that would happen all day. Someone would come and give me my bottle of water. I put my electrolytes in it. That was like my treat for the day when I was living down in a place called Lashkar. Then when I went back in 2010, a lot of the vehicles that I was driving through the desert to resupply people were either bulk water or bulk fuel. And actually, what we had done is we'd made it more easy to resupply. We'd got a bit more relaxed. We'd moved from what we call an expeditionary to a kind of a campaign mindset. So we're giving people 8 bottles of water a day rather than make them drink the slightly funny tasting water out of the wells. And then when I went back in 2012, I was in the upper Gresh Valley, and I saw a sign next to one of the kind of makeshift urinals there, where it said, you know, when you're finished, just pour the bottle of water down the drain to get rid of the smell. And that was Bastion Spring, where we dug a borehole. We'd made water so available to everybody that everyone was, you know, we were literally washing in it and pouring it down the loo. So there's something in there about not only is it just finding a new way, but it's also just being more efficient with the stuff that we've got. The picture in the middle isn't me, that's my Sergeant Major, Al Mawson, a bit of a legend. But what was great with he's drinking out of a kind of cut-off bottle of Bastion spring water. What was great about the temperature out there is you could just leave the bottles of water on the roof of your armoured vehicle. The sun would heat the water up. You could just cut the top off, drop a tea bag in, instant cup of tea. So we drank a lot of tea. That's Al drinking a cup of tea. One of the things I said about the kind of combat logistic patrol is you never, ever get out of your vehicle because clearly there's bad things in the ground and other things going on. So you always stay in the vehicle. So you have to do everything in the vehicle. I mean, everything in the vehicle. You can sometimes be there for 4 or 5 days without exiting that vehicle. So my one tip, if you do find yourself on a combat logistic patrol in Afghanistan, do not get your teacup mixed up with your wee cup. It's a pretty harrowing experience. So the Army, I guess we're already feeling the impacts of climate change. We spend a lot of time around the world doing what we call humanitarian aid and disaster relief, or HADA. And so I guess one of the impacts to think through isn't just how do we do our own operations differently, but how will this affect us? How will this affect the global security situation? That's really important to us. I really like this graph because it kind of points different versions of the future. I'm sure you've all seen it. And it shows at the kind of the bottom one, what would happen if if we fix everything and everyone lives up to the pledges and we stick to 1.5 degrees. Well, there's still an irreversible change, and it's still going to get hotter, drier, wetter. There'll be more floods. There'll be more extreme weather events. And then as you kind of go up, it gets worse and worse. And I mean, it's really stark, those lines of colour. I don't know if you've seen the one that shows the kind of decreasing biodiversity at the same time. And when you then overlay some of the other effects of the great acceleration over this, it kind of becomes slightly more terrifying. And in the military, we tend to plan. We plan for everything. Planning is everything. The plan is nothing. No plan survives contact with the enemy, but plans are important, right? So, and we plan against what we call the most likely course of action and the most dangerous course of action. And we have a range of plans to suit each one. So we kind of plan for each one of these future eventualities. Generally, it ends up being somewhere in the middle. So you could kind of pitch, where do you think we're going to end up over the next few years? Are we going to be, optimistically on the bottom line? Are we pessimistically going to be on the top, or with some kind of self-perpetuating, potentially trigger events? Or are we going to be somewhere in the middle? I don't know. But then if you look at some of the reasons how we got there, have all of those reasons changed? So the Great Acceleration is really interesting. A population of 2.5 billion in 1950 that has risen to 8 billion today, that is predicted to rise to 10 billion peak human in the next 20 years. Well, I don't see that necessarily affecting this graph in a particularly good way. Or the increase in pollution, plastics, acidification of the ocean. Again, I'm a realist, not a pessimist, but I would just say that where do we think that this is going to impact? And what does that mean for us? Well, security, it's a complex problem, and I kind of tried to draw it in this nexus of what I think is in the middle, where you've got extreme weather. We kind of know we're already there. You've got floods, rising temperatures, melting ice caps. We're already in a world of climate migration. We've had a pandemic. There's definitely inequality. The climate affects countries that are affected already by conflict in a very unequal way across the globe. And we've already seen kind of violent extremist organisations taking advantage of some of the fractures that this is creating. And then around the outside, if you really think about some of the things that really concern us when we look at security, I talked a bit about kind of starting from the bottom, health security, human security, the future pandemics. What is the next pandemic? I've talked about biodiversity declining, and that increases the risk of things like zoonotic diseases. It's not a case really of if there'll be another pandemic. It's probably when will be the next pandemic and what type will it be. If you then kind of go around the circle, and we know food security is already an issue in many places. Even though there's 8 million people on the planet and we use half of the habitable land to do our agriculture, there's still about 1 billion of those people who don't get fed enough food, and there's also an obesity crisis going on in a different part of the world. That's a pretty illogical way to look at our food consumption. So again, is that going to get better or is that going to get worse? Linked to that, clearly water. You need water to irrigate. There's already loads of pollutants in the rain. There's already loads of plastic in the ocean, more plastic than fish by the time we get to 2050. And you need water for food. And then clearly energy. That's just access to fossil fuels, access to rare earth minerals for future types of fuels, and kind of lots to consider around that. And you need energy to help you with food and water security. So they're kind of all interlinked. It's a really complex situation. I just thought I'd just lodge that. That's something that we have to think about as an army when we think about our role in kind of global security. But energy transition. We talked about the energy transformation, and I think that's an area where there can be some opportunity, and perhaps where some of the things that we can do together to kind of work our way through this. And what you can see from the picture there is New York City, Fifth Avenue in 1900, and then again 10 years or 13 years later. On the one on my right, your left, shows all of the horse-drawn carts, and then there was because of all of the horses in New York, there was a climate crisis. There was lots of horse poo everywhere. People didn't like it. It was environmentally difficult, so they needed to find a different way. And at the same time, there was the Model T Ford, mass production of the Model T Ford. So the ability to move to something new appeared. There was a new market with a new thing that suddenly became accessible. And it's pretty amazing that this wasn't just the transformation from a horse to a faster horse. This was a horse to a totally new, different system. So it was a systematic approach that totally changed the way the world is now. So it needed garages and roads and mechanics and all the other things that come with the automobile industry. And they did that transformation in 10 years, just before the First World War. And you can see in the other picture on the other side, where in that 13 years later, every single horse is replaced by a vehicle, bar one. There's still one horse left in the kind of red ring. And I guess my point there is, as you go through the transformation, and we definitely don't want to be, the British Army does not want to be that horse at the end of the energy transformation. We want to be somewhere else, and we want our transformation to be beautiful. We don't want to be a faster caterpillar. We want to be the butterfly. So that's enough transformation analogies. And I think there is a way that we can do this. And I guess sometimes bureaucracy, a kind of hierarchical organisation like the Army, isn't renowned for its innovation, but the Army has, and the military has innovated. If you think back to kind of the time around the Second World War, leading into globalisation, the invention of the jet engine, the Jeep, which you can see there next to some innovative thinkers, the GPS, the internet. There's a whole bunch of stuff radar that led after the Second World War to the ability to globalise. Now, clearly that's caused some slight issues slightly further downstream, but at the time there was an absolute requirement for the world to globalise, again, for the security and the economy. And so there's a moment here where I think the Army has the opportunity to help again. It was a time where there was jeopardy, and jeopardy often drives transformation. And I think in kind of the guys on the screen, if you've been watching Rogue Heroes, we need to be a bit more Rogue Hero and a little less Captain Sobel if you've watched Band of Brothers. But kind of that free thinking, that ability to use the jeopardy to to transform stuff, I think is where the Army can add value. And some of the areas where we're doing that is in our procurement. So this is looking at hybrid electric drive vehicles. For us, it's not about our carbon footprint. Again, this is about the ability to go into enemy deep, as we call it, go silent, no thermal signature, to be able to operate without having to resupply with fuel, to off-grid the power at the point of need, link up with microgrids, generate your own power, and be able to operate without resupply and operate silently. So there's something in there, and something again around our wider procurement chain about how we look at some of the opportunities that are coming up. Our built estate, we've got a massive built estate. We own about 1.4% of the UK. We have 750 sites in the Army, 100,000 buildings. Most of our built estate is next to a trading estate, so there's quite a lot of land that comes with that. So the opportunity for us to modernise is there, but again, being a slightly slow government organisation, the ability to generate the funds to do some of that is slightly holding us back, where I think there's a huge amount of opportunity. And then, as I've said, that kind of at the point of need for power, as the Army's requirement becomes much more technical and our increasing requirement for power on the battlefield grows, there's all kinds of technology that we can use. Now, I've kind of whizzed through those last 3 slides because I've got a short video that pulls all that together, which I'll show in a second. But ultimately, it kind of comes down to this, and this is, again, this sort of thing about where does the Army find its value, and it's kind of, I guess it is slightly difficult to sum up, but really for us, this is about, if we want to have an impact on the battlefield, it's about how our force output is what we call that. It's not just amassing soldiers and equipment, it's about the ability to take our data, which we talk about from sensors like drones through deciders who take the information, and then effectors, which are basically the guns at the end of it. It's that process. That's only good if it's got energy, if it's got the ability to power itself all of the time. At the moment, we probably have to unplug about 2/3 of the time to recharge, and that isn't effective. There is a way for us to be more effective. So I'll show the short video, and then hopefully there'll be some time for questions, because that's probably where the value will be.
Climate change is symbiotic with security. It is an acute, existential threat multiplier. We are already in an era of violent weather events, resulting in an increase in humanitarian aid and disaster relief operations, and an increase in conflict as a result of drought, food and water security, and climate migration. The British Army is working across defence and the government and with industry partners to optimise green power to deliver competitive advantage. The renewable technology revolution represents the next epoch of general-purpose technology, which requires a strategic approach to drive systemic change, innovation and widespread adoption across the Army. Work is already underway to deliver a climate-resilient estate. This includes the installation of solar and wind farms on Army land, a sustainable approach to waste and water, sustainable building and improvement to the legacy estate, adoption of building energy management systems and LED lighting, installation of electric vehicle charging points, and electrification of the vehicle white fleet. A reduced dependence on fossil fuels will also increase resilience and agility on operations, from the strategic outload through to the front line. The demand for power on the battlefield is increasing exponentially. Meeting this requirement is essential for the delivery of competitive advantage. We will work with NATO and our allies to develop a common approach to power management to ensure interoperability. We are already at the leading edge of hybrid electric drive technology, proven through use on the Foxhound, MAN SV truck and Jackal platforms. Renewable technology will reduce our fuel and grid dependence, easing pressure on supply chains and increasing our freedom of maneuver. It will enable us to operate at greater reach for longer periods with lower thermal signatures and less logistic tail, seizing the opportunities now to optimize green power for competitive advantage means that the British Army will be ready to respond to what matters in an ever more volatile, uncertain and complex world.
So I hope that's provided a kind of, I guess, a different lens to look at the challenge through. Definitely the greatest challenge I think that's ever been faced by kind of modern humanity. I'm kind of humbled again to be here amongst such experts, but I do welcome the chance to kind of broaden my own perspective, join the dance of change, and hopefully that you guys can help me with that. But thanks very much for having me. I think we've got a few minutes for questions, but it'd be great to take them.
A microphone is being run to you at lightning speed. Thanks, Charlie.
Hi, that was really great to kind of hear the ins and outs of the British Army and what you're doing to the sustainability agenda. And I guess it's really important for you guys, as you were saying, you're a massive landowner and you have a massive presence. So part of me, obviously, seeing the wars that are happening right now is, you know, there are defense companies, they're on the capital markets. People can make money from companies that are listed. What are your kind of thoughts about, you know, as a sustainability perspective, on how defense companies can actually be on a capital market and be traded against? So it's almost incentivizing war, etc. I would love to know your thoughts.
So just let me understand the question. So in terms of, does the defence industrial complex...
Should defence companies be able to be listed on a stock exchange?
Okay. I mean, it's a great question. I'm not sure I'm necessarily qualified to answer that. And it kind of sits outside the remit of what I've come to talk about. Should they be listed on the stock exchange? So I think the defence industrial complex in itself is something that we've got to talk about, right? So almost draw the conversation back to sustainability first. And our scope 1 and 2, there's still a bit of work that we need to do in terms of that, but when we start to look at scope 3, there's a fundamental question to ask around that. Now, the defence industrial complex will react to what we ask it to react to in a way that is, if we're setting a demand signal that says that we want to be more sustainable, then they'll have to produce more sustainable stuff and have to do it in a more sustainable way. In terms of how they should be treated, for me, I will step back from that question because I think it isn't right for me to try and answer it here. But I would say that if that's what people genuinely think, then that's a conversation that should be had. People should talk about that in a way that I'm not shying away from the question. I just don't feel that it's necessarily right for me to answer it. But I do like challenging questions. But if they could be focused around what I'm allowed to talk about, that's probably better.
One quick question here, and then one there, if we may, and then we'll wrap. Tim, can I ask you, you guys, the British Army, you've got quite a lot on your plate at the moment, today, this week. To what extent is your sustainability work either hindered or accelerated by where we are right now?
In terms of global politics?
Yeah.
Again, I think everything comes with challenge and opportunity. If certain global players are going to take a step back, then yes, that is going to impact kind of how the army is operating.
Is it a catalyst though for speeding up what you're doing, or is that just too hopeful?
I don't know. I don't know if it's a catalyst. I think it does. I think it does produce an opportunity for Europe in particular to take a step up on the world stage. It's kind of left the space open to be filled, right? And in one sense, I think that in the same way that I think the army has got a role to play here, then I think that we all do. And am I allowed to use a nature analogy? So it's kind of what I've taken away from the last couple of days. I think a lot of people, I get the impression they feel a bit like a buffalo in a storm, right? And their buffalo faces a storm, faces it head on. Quickest way through is just to plow on through, and you often see the picture of the buffalo with a frozen head. Well, I kind of feel that this is more. I'm going back to nature. I love nature, right? So I think this is more about penguins, and penguins are called different things depending on where they are. Whether they're in the water, they're a raft. When they're on the land, they're a huddle. So I feel that this is like we've got an opportunity to be like a penguin huddle. Now, you can't move around too quickly, you can't get too tight if you go too quickly, The gaps go too big and the penguins freeze. If you go too tight, they can't move and they freeze. But to succeed, they've all got to work together. I know that doesn't necessarily answer the question of has the political situation created a void for us to step into, but I genuinely do think there's an opportunity for people to create that huddle, and I think the opportunity is there. I think the opportunity is still there if people want it. We shouldn't shy away just because the political situation is. And again, go back to kind of purpose, go back to perspective and perception. For me, that just drives the kind of purpose, and therefore my perspective on the subject is to find the huddle and kind of get on with it and turn the words into actions.
Thank you. One last quick question, sir, and a quick answer, Brigadier Tim, if we can.
Thank you. I think you just covered it really, but how do you just convince the people that sustainability is important, considering defence's primary role is lethality?
Yeah. So again, kind of come back to some of the discussions we've had over the last couple of days around keeping your stakeholders engaged, your internal and external stakeholders. If I go to the Army Board and say, if I went to the Army Board tomorrow and say, right, we need to do more sustainable stuff and we need to be green and we need to talk about the climate, they would literally throw me out the window. I mean, they are in a world where they know this is important, but they are absolutely consumed by the urgent. And I think that would be, I guess, my key takeaway. It is at some point we've got to move what is really, really important, and I think it's urgent, but I've got to get everybody else to see how urgent it is. And that's kind of when I was talking about the jeopardy. Sometimes it's helpful. Sometimes it's helpful to have that kind of global shift. Sometimes it's helpful to really, really understand what kind of. I don't think we talk about the why enough. That picture of the kind of the great acceleration. I genuinely think this is the challenge of humankind. And if we don't address it, then it will move from the important into the urgent, but it'll move it in such a way that we won't be able to react to it. So it's kind of, how do we move this conversation so that it's not just important, but it's urgent as well? It's probably where I'd think.
Tim, an absolute, your own words, a different lens through which to see sustainability, to end Sustainability Live Net Zero 2025. Thank you very much. It's been
Thanks very much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.